Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm here today to talk to you about the online undergraduate program plan change workflow. So this is having the option to have an online major change form to use in lieu of the paper PDF major change form. It's been on the registrar's office website. It's kind of something that's been on people's wish list for a long time. There's actually been quite a bit of energy and attention given to this over the course of the last year and a half. And a lot of work has been kind of steadily been done to kind of work on something that we can implement for this. So I just kind of want to update everyone today on where we are, kind of what work has been done and kind of where we're going from here with this. So in terms of updates, kind of the first thing is, there has been several committees actually kind of working on this. And kind of one of the things we first realized in looking at the existing form is that this is going to need to be a multi-phase project. So I just kind of want to start off the bat kind of mentioning that this is a project that's very large in scope. If you look at all the different types of plans that we have and all the different students and the different populations and the different people that approve or have to review major changes before they can be approved. So this is something definitely it's going to be kind of rolled out in different stages. So what I'm talking specifically about today is going to be focused on phase one, which is the one that we've been working on the most. And we'll talk a little bit on the next slide about what's included in that. But I just kind of want to make sure everyone's aware that this is something that's going to be very much a work in progress for quite a while. But in terms of the first phase, we kind of started this actually last summer, kind of during the pandemic. There were some meetings a little bit before that, but the real work kind of started last summer and has been kind of going continually ever since then. And that first phase of phase one was actually kind of a planning phase where we were kind of doing requirement gathering, talking to different offices about what their needs were and who needed to approve it, and looking at different types of plans that we have. So that kind of went on for about 2 semesters. We had kind of weekly meetings, kind of gathering all of our information and kind of documenting all of it so we could turn that into sort of documentation for ITS that they could use in the building out of this workflow. And that development, they're actually building out of the form from our instructions and the information we gathered in the summer and the fall. That kind of occurred this past spring. It did take quite a while for the development just because of the complexity of the form and all of the different routing and the places it would have to go and all the different types of plans that we're looking at for this. So spring is kind of when that occurred. Once the development phase was done, then we did a couple of rounds of testing. Most of that occurred this summer. So we did kind of 2 rounds. One was kind of an initial round with ITS that went on for, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks or so. And then we just wrapped up last week with a final phase of testing where we had people from different offices on campus that needed to be kind of directly involved. So we had representatives from dean's offices and advisors and mapping coordinators and athletics and the veterans and the registrar's office. You can see the list there, but we kind of had all these people, come to testing sessions over the last 4 weeks and just kind of make sure that the form was working according to kind of what we had developed and worked out in our documentation when we were doing that gathering of information phase. So the good thing is when we went through our testing, we did find some issues, most of which have since been resolved. We've kind of been reporting, as we were testing, we reported anything that was broken or not working quite the way we wanted to ITS, and their development team worked really quickly to kind of address anything that we saw. So most of that has since been taken care of. So there's not really anything that was like what we consider a showstopper that would prevent us from having to go live with the form according to our schedule. So we are looking now, hopefully, with having this first phase of this project live early this fall semester. So now that our testing is done, we're really looking to kind of begin doing that rollout to campus and having this ready for y'all to be able to use. So in terms of phase one, these are just kind of the highlights about what's going to be included in this phase. So we are calling this an undergraduate program plan change form. Obviously, undergraduate is the first word there. So one thing to note, it is limited to undergraduate students. So this is something you'll use for an undergraduate who is trying to change majors. It's not going to allow for major changes in other careers, so like graduate law, non-degree seeking students. Those students you wouldn't be able to use this form for. This is strictly an undergraduate student who's degree seeking and currently active in a program. It will allow for changes to the academic program. So if you have a student who's a freshman in music and they want to change out of music and move into English or biology or some other major on campus, you could change their program so that they're changing out of BMIS and into UGST or Bach, or if they're changing to another limited access program like dance, you could do a change to any other program that is currently available at the undergrad degree seeking level. And then you also have the option, of course, we're looking at primary majors here. So this would be a feature where you could change the student's primary academic plan. So it is limited to primary majors in this first phase. We're not looking at second majors, sub-plans within a major, second degrees, anything like that. So this will be kind of, you've got, one student who's changing from one major into another, not adding a second major or swapping a second major or anything like that. We're really in this first phase strictly looking at just the change to the primary major the student is in. So in kinds of looking at when you would kind of use this, the goal with this workflow is to have a way or a mechanism for you to request a major change that's replacing the paper form for an individual student. So this is kind of really, I know we have processes like batch processes like certification, where Christina Pater sends you a list and you're doing kind of mass changes of students and certifying them from UGS to Bach as part of a batch process. This form isn't really going to change anything with that certification process or any other kind of mass process that you're doing where you're doing batch changes. Think of this as, you're an advisor in the biology department. You've got an exploratory student who comes in and says they want to change their major to biology. Instead of now doing the paper form that you would have used in the past, you just now have this other form that you can submit electronically to request that change of major for the student. So it's looking at individual students who are coming into your office and you're wanting to change their majors after you've met with them. So this form, once we go live with this, it will actually be available in Student Central. So within your student homepage or your staff homepage, in Student Central, you have that academic advising tile, and there will be a link to this form that will actually be in that advising tools drop down. And I'll kind of show you a visual of this in a couple slides in a minute. The last note here is just kind of something else I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of as we're going into the first phase of this process. So currently, when you have the paper form, you're filling it out, you give it to the student, they sign it, and then they take it to their dean's office or another office that needs to approve it. Whoever is at the end of that process, whoever is that final approver, is then changing that student's major in the system. That will still be the case in this online form. So the form itself is not electronically updating the student's major in Student Central. So that is still going to be a manual process, at least in this first phase. So whoever is going to be, the final approver in the online form will still, when they get the online form and they're reviewing that student, if everything's okay, they're still going to be manually updating that student's major. And if there's a change in their mapping term or mapping status, those updates also will still continue to be manual. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that the form itself will be routed electronically to each office, but the actual changing of the major itself is still going to be a manual update. In terms of accessing the form, once we're live, this is kind of where it's going to be located. So once you log into your my.fsu.edu in Student Central, you have your academic advising tile. There will be a new link in that advising tools folder. I've kind of got the screenshot over here that you can see. That undergrad program plan change link will live right under the FSU map term link that's there now. So that is where you would go to access this online form once it becomes available. And just a reminder, you do need that FSU AASS Access Advisor EOR role to access that advising tile and get to this link. So I've kind of outlined here just kind of what the business process for the online form will be as opposed to the paper process. The first 2 points you can kind of see here really are exactly the same as what they are now. So even when we move to this online form, the process is still going to start out where the student is going to come into your office and want to meet with you and say, I want to change my major. So going back to the example before, I'm an advisor in biology. Exploratory student comes in and says they want to change their major. I meet with a student. I'm still going to review their records. So I'm going to look at their advising report, their transcript, check their mapping milestones. If I'm limited access, I'm looking for my GPA requirement for my department. So all of that is still happening just as it normally would. And then when you get to this third step, so if your student's on track and the major change is something that you want to, that the student is eligible to do, and you verified that, instead of doing the paper form and filling in the PDF or filling it in, just with a pen, you will then access the online form, and from there you'll be able to request the major change for that student. Once you submit that online request, within a couple of seconds, the student is going to get a to-do item assigned to them. They will have a to-do checklist that they will see in their My Tasks tile or in their portal page. And that's going to ask them to go in and review the information that you filled in on that request. And it's going to be pretty straightforward. It's going to have their current major on one side and then what you requested on the other side, highlighted in red. So it's easy for them to kind of compare and see where they were and what they're going into. And then they have to electronically acknowledge that they're okay with this request. And this is kind of like the student signing off on the paper form. And there's language on the form in the online version as well, just that the student is, when they're clicking that electronic signature, that they're acknowledging all the changes that this could impact for things like excess credit, financial aid, timeline to graduation, all those things we want them to be aware of when they're doing a major change like this. And then upon the student clicking that to do, assuming they've clicked that electronic signature and acknowledged the form and approving the request, at that point, the workflow form will get generated. And this is where the form is then going to get routed to anyone who needs to approve it. So, and this is going to depend on the student's population and kind of where that student, what populations that student is in. So if they're a student athlete, it's going to go to athletics, and someone in the athletic office is going to have to approve it. And of course, all of them are going to go to the student's academic dean's office. So that's kind of where, after that workflow is generated, it's going to route on to whoever has to approve the form for that student, depending upon what major they're changing into and kind of what populations they're in. And then, like we talked about, that final approver, whoever is at the end of that chain, that last approver in that step, when they're reviewing, before they're approving the form, they're going to update that student's major and mapping information in the system, and then click approve to finalize and close out the workflow. So here's kind of where we are looking at in terms of timeline for this phase of this project. We've already talked about the training is done, so we're kind of ready to begin the rollout. So we're kind of looking at having a training session for advisors and approvers sometime early in the fall. Right now, we're looking at kind of sometime that week of the Labor Day holiday, September 7th through 10th. I don't have an exact date yet. I'm still trying to look at calendars and kind of figure out what's going to be the optimal time. It'll probably be sometime in the middle of that week. But this will be kind of a live session. It'll likely be a Zoom session because of the number of people who are going to have to attend. But this will be kind of a chance for you to see the entire process for the workflow from start to finish. And we're going to walk you through it step by step, what the advisor page looks like, what the student acknowledgement looks like, and then what the approver page will look like and what that process looks like for them. So we're going to have that set up pretty soon. Keep an eye on the CIA listserv. Once we've got the date pinned down with the time, we will definitely send that out over the listserv so you can kind of block off that time on your calendar. We'll definitely be recording that session. We're working on some training resources right now, so there will be kind of how-to documents and some videos and some other resources that will be available. We're kind of working on a couple of training resources that will kind of help you see kind of where the information you're filling in on the online form, where that information currently is on the paper form. So kind of a translation document, so you can kind of see what you used to put here, you'll now put in this place in the online form. And then our target go live date after training would be that week directly after the training. So our goal right now is to kind of have this up and running on Thursday, September 16th. So it would go live that evening when ITS does their nightly migrations. So don't look for it on the morning of the 16th, but definitely when you get in the office on the 17th, it will be up by then. Okay, so that's what I have for right now. Are there any questions about um, this process or what's coming in this phase of the project?
Yeah, Scott, this is Rachel over in music. If I can jump in.
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. So I just wanted to confirm earlier you said this does not apply to double major, dual degree. This is just for like, I mean, pardon the expression, like cold turkey major changes. Is that correct?
So you can change the student's primary major.
Okay.
So if it's a dual degree student already, so if they've got two undergraduate careers, they've got one in music and they're also doing a second bachelor's in English,
Mm-hmm.
you could change, they've got kind of two plan sequence 10s in that case. So you could change the major for one of those degrees if they're
Okay.
already dual degree. Because that student really, they kind of have two primary majors that are both at plan sequence 10 in their program plan stacks.
Right. But if a student is looking to change one of those, could we use this or no? Oh no, I'm sorry. If it is, I'm so sorry. If a student is trying to add like a double major or a dual degree.
No, you wouldn't be able to do that with the form yet.
Okay. Okay.
So
Got
for
it.
those
Thank you.
situations like that, you would still be using the paper form.
Okay. Okay. So are we looking at adding that option moving forward? Is that a possibility or has that been considered?
Yeah, we've talked about kind of preliminarily what's going to be included in phase two. So things like minors, second majors.
Hmm.
I think we have had some discussion about dual degrees. Those are a little more complicated, but yeah, things like that are things that we're looking at for kind of second and third phase.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. You're welcome. That is a good point, though, just that, we're not removing the paper form at this time because there will be situations where you will still need it if you're doing a student and they are trying to add a second major or you're changing their minor or something that's not included in phase one. The paper form is still going to be there as a resource when you've got those other types of plan changes that you're needing to work on. Any other questions?
Any final questions for Scott? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. I appreciate your help, Scott. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone. You'll be hearing from me soon once we get the training date set up.